Coming up on Network Africa, 3 students die of suspected food poisoning at a school in South Africa's Eastern province of Mpumalanga. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, and his predecessor, Joseph Kabila, agreed to form a coalition government. Plus, India's president visits Benin Republic, announces a loan of $100 million for developmental projects in the West African nation. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobwale. 3 students have died of suspected food poisoning at a school in South Africa's eastern province of Mpumalanga. Reports say students at Nelson Ngobeni Primary School complained about stomach pain on Monday afternoon and started to vomit. Reports say they were taken to hospital, but 2 of the children died on the way, while another died at the hospital. A spokesperson from Mpumalanga's Education Department, Jasper Zwane, says there are currently about 10 students from the same school who are being treated at a hospital. He adds that an investigation has begun and the province's education minister is expected to meet parents later. Let's get more on this story from our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa. So, Betty, what more can you tell us about the suspected food poisoning at a school in Mpumalanga?
Well, as the MEC has said, that's a member of the executive committee, investigations are on to actually find what happened or what caused this so that more children will not be affected. But what I can say is that 10 of the children are being treated to go home. You have contrary to the reports of 3 dead, 2 have died, and 1 that was in ICU, according to the hospital, will be discharged tomorrow. But the MEC has visited the hospital, has spoken to some of the children, and has also visited the school to talk to the parents and to talk to the school authorities to find out what that is still out there. Nobody knows what has happened, what caused this. But for now, the immediate measures is that the school nutrition program, some of the public schools here have a kind of nutrition program where children are given food during school time. That has been suspended so that if it is from that source, no other child will be affected. And they've said they will support the families affected. Those who have lost their children will be assisted to bury the dead, and the families that the children have survived for counseling and other forms of support that they need. But it's really unfortunate, and we recorded some of these incidents here and there, but I wouldn't say it happens very often, but we've had cases of food poisoning in some of the schools.
Yeah, what about the other students in the school? What's being done to keep a close eye on them in case, something does happen to avoid any more deaths?
Counseled, of course, knowing that some of their friends may have died and some have been hurt. But the general string that ties all the children is the school nutrition program. That has been suspended, so that if the source is from there and children are being spoken to, probably anything untoward. Because we recorded an incident in another province where some of the children got food poisoning from stuff they bought from the food vendors outside the school. So people are being questioned, but an investigation is on right now, according to the MEC, to find out where this is from and to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Definitely, Betty. Thank you for speaking to us. We hope for fast recovery for the rest of the students. Thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you.
In East Africa, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, and his predecessor, Joseph Kabila, have agreed to form a coalition government. The announcement was made by chief negotiators on live TV on Monday night. The cabinet will consist of 66 members. These include Prime Minister Sylvester Ilunkamba, who was proposed by Mr. Kabila. 42 positions will be held by Mr. Kabila's coalition and 23 will be held by Mr. Tshisekedi's alliance. This comes 7 months after Mr. Tshisekedi's party won the elections. Questions were raised at the time about the accuracy of the results amid accusations that Mr. Tshisekedi had made a pre-election power-sharing deal with Mr. Kabila. Now, the head of Sudan's ruling military council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, says there must be immediate accountability over an incident in which at least 4 school children were shot dead on Monday. The group spearheading the protest, the Sudan Professional Association, says the ruling military council is to blame for the deaths and is now calling for nationwide protest. It is also demanding an immediate transfer of power to civilians. Anti-government protests have been taking place across Sudan since December. They, of course, led to the ousting of former President Omar al-Bashir. The VOA's Novo Mohidin joins us live from Khartoum to tell us more about this. Naba, the head of Sudan's ruling military council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has condemned the killings, saying they are unacceptable. What happens next now? Will anyone be held accountable?
Actually, the impact already had happened yesterday when protesters refused any talks and pushed on opposition to stop the talks with the TMC. So right now the talks are suspended to undefined time, as opposition stated. So it will impact the deal and it will impact the political and security situation.
Which is my question. We've been going back and forth over this deal. What impact is this likely to have on the power-sharing deal being negotiated now?
Unfortunately, no one will be held accountable for this violence, as well as other violent events took place in Khartoum and other states. It's always TMC said that RSF is not responsible of it, and military troops are not responsible, and always put the blame on the former regime militias. So no one will be held accountable for now.
Finally, Naba, just before I let you go, we understand that 8 senior military officers have been arrested over the deaths of about 87 people who were killed when security forces broke up a protest on June the 3rd. How is the SPA reacting to this? Are they optimistic that justice will indeed be served in this case? Naba, if you can hear me, I was asking, are the SPA optimistic that justice will be served in this case? Seems we've lost connection to Naba, but let's move on to some other stories now. The United Nations envoy is asking for a ceasefire in Libya to be declared by August the 10th. The UN Libya envoy, Ghassan Salamé, also told the Security Council that an influx of weapons from foreign support is in violation of an arms embargo is fueling the conflict. He adds that the truce should be declared to mark the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday and be accompanied by confidence-building moves like an exchange of prisoners and the release of those detained.
I call for a truce to be declared for the Eid al-Adha, which will fall on or about August the 10th. The truce should be accompanied by confidence-building measures between the parties to include the exchange of prisoners, release of those arbitrarily detained or abducted, and the exchange of mortal remains. In the course of the current fighting, serious violation of international human rights and humanitarian law by all parties have been committed. More than ever, Libyans are now fighting the wars of other countries who appear content to fight to the last Libyan and to see the country entirely destroyed in order to settle their own scores. Armed drones, armored vehicles, pick-up trucks fitted with heavy armaments, machine guns, recoilless rifles, mortar and rocket launchers have been recently transferred to Libya with the complicity and indeed outright support of foreign governments.
Turning to his 3-part proposal for an Eid al-Adha truce accompanied by confidence-building measures, for a high-level meeting of concerned countries to be followed by an internal Libya meeting. These are obviously very important elements, Mr. President, coming at a very critical time. I think the Council will want to discuss them in some detail and work out how best the Council can enhance the UN's efforts.
Meanwhile, the United Nations top official in Somalia, James Swan, has highlighted the importance of building on Somaliland's achievement, as well as preparing for upcoming elections there. Mr. Swan said this on his two-day visit to Hargeisa, his first since assuming his position in late June. Aside from meeting with the local leadership, he was also there to help strengthen UN collaboration regarding humanitarian activities, economic development and capacity building for local governance and service delivery.
It was inspirational to see the practical training being provided to equip refugees and asylum seekers to support themselves and their families, and also to contribute to the host economy and the community here in Somaliland. We also discussed the importance of completing the necessary preparatory work to proceed to credible parliamentary and local elections very soon. And in this context, I'm very pleased to have noted the agreement reached among political parties just yesterday to move forward in preparing for elections.
India's president has announced a loan of $100 million to Benin Republic for developmental projects in the West African nation. Ramnath Kovind was received in the country by President Patrice Talon on Monday on the first stop of a West African tour of Africa. He is continuing then on to Gambia and Guinea. President Kovind also addressed Benin's National Assembly in the capital, Port Novo, and attended a banquet hosted in his honor. Some of the issues discussed afterwards include defense and security cooperation, with India offering further training assistance to Benin to expand its anti-piracy capacity. The president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, is pushing African countries to boost output of goods and services and incorporate payment systems if they are to benefit from a new $3.4 trillion economic plan. A continental free trade zone was launched this month in Niger, which, if successful, will usher in a new era of development for an area with a population of 1.3 billion people.
It is hoped that the 55-nation African Continental Free Trade Area, the largest bloc since the creation of the World Trade Organization in 1994, will help unlock Africa's economic potential by boosting intra-regional trade, strengthening supply chains and spreading expertise. Akinwumi Adesina, president of the African Development Bank, says he expects industrial manufacturing capacity in Africa to increase, while financial markets will integrate and food production expands.
Where others simply import and put stuff in, Africa has to have its own industrial capacity to be able to take advantage of a $3.3 trillion market with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So Africa has to industrialize. Industrialization is critical. It's not just about moving raw materials, it's value-added products. So the critical sectors for me is the manufacturing sector. The industrial manufacturing capacity of Africa has to increase.
The bank chief said African countries need to mobilize more domestic resources and encourage sovereign wealth and pension funds to invest in infrastructure.
The African Development Bank last year, we launched what's called the Africa Investment Forum, where we brought in the world of investors to Africa. And here's what happened. In less than 72 hours, we mobilized $38.7 billion for Africa. So that tells me the opportunities are there if we can get the business and investment regulatory environments to work.
He maintains that nations need to provide the right incentives to boost local output while encouraging competition.
Still to come on the program, the world marks International